What's up, everyone? Welcome to the First and Last Hit show. I am Mac, your host.
And I normally go by Big Andy Harbert, but tonight I am going by Black Shamrock. Name I've
And
had for
tonight's guest is a freelance writer, Albert Lanier.
he's a comedian too, isn't he?
I think he's done some comedian work. I also think he's done something in acting. I also read something about he's done something with investigations, or he's like interested in investigations or something like that.
It looks like we got something to talk about.
So I'm hoping that he's
Interested in talking about it. So real quick, I want to just let everybody know a big thank you. Mac, I believe you said you did a short video yesterday. I apologize, I didn't get a chance to. Um, I just checked our YouTube channel. We are at 460 subscribers. Thank
by
you all.
tonight. Let's get 500, please, and thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank you all for subscribing, being a part of the show. Big things are coming, and we are just so grateful that you could be along for the ride.
Also, our sponsors tonight is from the D2 Mighty Falcons.
All right.
Can't wait to say I can't wait to get the 5 rings, and I can do that Booker T thing 5 times. And then look,
You'll slip up and say WCW champion. And you're like,
you know what? I probably will. I just might. Okay, so he's just got the email.
I apologize to all who might hear another little mini guest tonight.
So it's saying that something is up with Riverside. I had to refresh it twice, and it's still directing me to you.
Huh?
That's odd.
Yeah, so what do we do?
I'm gonna try sending him a new link, I guess.
It wouldn't be the first and last hit show if we didn't have technical difficulties. I think if we did a blooper reel, I think just about every single episode would be on it.
Why wouldn't it be? I mean,
yeah. So, Mac, how was your week?
it was actually okay. I'm actually gonna be going back to work next Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So I'll only be working 3 days a week.
The same place as before?
Back to one of my old jobs.
You're cleaning out all those abandoned places like we talked about in the last episode.
That's where I'm going back to.
Dude, I was just kidding. I didn't even know nothing about that.
Yep, well, that's where I'm going back to. 3 days a week.
All right.
I just sent him another invite.
Let's see what happens.
I mean, it would pop up on the bottom screen here.
Yep. I want to also take the time to apologize to everybody if I seem a little under the weather. Dealing with stuff
is it possible to send a link through text?
I mean, you might be. I mean, I don't know. I wonder if it's the device. You know what I mean? Like, do you have the Riverside app on your phone?
No. Let me copy this link, I guess. Can you copy the link, message it to me, and then I'll copy it from Messenger and send it to...
Invite people. This copy link. All right, I sent it to you.
All right. So, that's not how I wanted to do it. So we're going to do this. Dang it. Text. Nope. Go back.
Oh, you want me to send it to you text? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Messages. I got it. 80.
It's also in your text messages if that don't work.
I believe I sent it to him.
Right.
I did. Yeah, I'm excited. Next month, I'll Next month's the start of spring football.
Damn, already?
Yeah. Next
Yeah.
next month is the sign up for the draft and
All right.
combine.
So, do we have an idea of? I know we're originally for spring we were the Seahawks. Are we still the Seahawks, or did we end up getting a different team?
So we're either going to end up being the Seahawks or the Lions.
Uh I mean, is that really the only two choices we got?
I mean, if it was up to me, I'd stick with the Falcons, but they want to keep
Facts.
fall seasons, fall season as the
I've heard
Falcons,
it.
and they want to change, which I don't know why. But
I
here's
mean,
the thing, though. With that, there's going to be, I believe they're going to try and do two divisions. Um, so it's going to be four in one division and then four in another division. So there's going
oh,
to
okay.
be
Then there'd be a
eight
divisional championship, and then the
district.
bowl championship. I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. All right. You know what, dude? I think we should try the Lions.
What?
I think we should try the Lions.
I mean,
I
either one, I'm pretty much down for.
I mean, if you think about it, if we could be the Lions, I mean, what they haven't really done great professionally, and what like 100
They're doing
years.
good this year.
Oh, I mean, they even did good last year. The only reason they didn't get into the playoffs last year was because the way the playoffs work, you need certain
Well,
teams
then
to
they
win.
lost Matt Stafford too.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, they would have made it into the playoffs last year because they beat Green Bay, but it was another team that they needed that team to win, and their team that they needed to win ended up losing, and that's what took them out of the playoffs. I can't remember what team it was that lost though. Aside from that, though, I look, dude, like we're great coaches. You know what I mean? I really think that I mean, why not?
I mean, we got the. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it out there. We got the best of the best.
That's very true. Yes, absolutely.
It all started with. And shout out to Coach G. It all started with me and Coach G. You know, 5 seasons ago. Uh, cheers to you, big bro.
Yeah. Cheers, Coach W.
Line from my favorite line from sports movie is how does it go? We're gonna teach you to play like what? It starts with a W, and it's from the Mighty Ducks. And he
Oh yeah,
goes,
yeah.
We're gonna teach you to play like what? It starts with a W. Wussies. What's and then they go, Wussies on offense and defense, defense, defense. Haru.
I really hope that we end up getting the Lions. I mean, their game against Dallas, I was pushing for Dallas. I know how you feel about Dallas, but my wife is a Dallas fan, so I have to support them.
I understand.
But aside from that, I mean, I'm born and raised in Detroit, bro. Like, if we can't be the Bucks, I mean, at least give me the Lions. Give me something. You know what I mean? We can't coach college team uh, college sponsored teams. So Michigan is done out the window. Give me something
Well,
from
yeah,
Michigan. Give me
because the
Detroit.
NCAA does not sponsor flag football.
I would be, it should be. It would be sure. It would be cool if they did.
I wish we could have named our own team.
That'd be cool too. Yes,
I wish
absolutely.
we actually really could have actually.
And
Um,
here's our guest.
yeah, here's our guest. Finally, everything's working well, and we're
I
sorry about the
yeah
interruptions.
yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you
Okay,
perfectly.
okay, that's
Everyone,
good.
welcome. Everyone, welcome to the show. Albert Lanier, how are you, man?
I'm fine, and you?
I can't complain. I wish the weather would choose whether it's going to be hot or cold here.
Where are you, if you don't want my asking?
I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, I see.
One day it's 75 degrees and I'm wearing shorts, and the next day, like today, it's 35 degrees and getting ready to snow. So, other than that,
Now,
everything's
Mac,
well.
we might be better off just wearing shorts and a t-shirt no matter what the weather is. I was born and raised in Michigan. I used to do it all the time. I moved to Pennsylvania. People drive down the road looking at me. I had the police called on me for walking in the middle of a snowstorm in just shorts and a t-shirt. People would be like, "What are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Born and raised in Michigan, so this is nothing for me."
Okay. So are you used to it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So, are you born and raised in Hawaii, or?
that's correct. I lived, when I moved, I've moved a couple times, few times. Lived in LA twice, lived in Seattle, and want to get out of here because this place is, oh, enormously expensive. And retire where
You
I
thought
am,
about moving to the
hopefully on the
east?
West Coast where I intended to retire.
You ever been to the East Coast?
Oh yeah, New York, relatives in New York. Let me see, where else have I been in South Florida. Um, I can't recall where else I've been in the East Coast, but primarily New York,
Yeah,
Florida.
Florida's like
Yeah.
10 hours from me. Um, but yeah, so give the listeners and viewers a little background story about yourself.
Oh, okay. It looks like we're on. Um, my name is Albert Lanier, of course. I was a print journalist and freelance writer for 22 years. And I retired from print journalism and freelancing in 2017. And next month will be 7 years I've been retired from journalism and freelancing. But I'm still a professional writer, and I'm still a ghostwriter technically because I was three things. This is getting a bit complicated, but I was a freelance writer, I was a journalist, and I was a ghostwriter. Later on in life, I was a ghostwriter, about 2014 onward. So I'm still technically a writer, ghostwriter. And so this year is my 30th anniversary as a writer, as a professional writer in general. So um,
Oh, that's awesome.
I wrote for magazines, newspapers, a number of publications. And I also did other types of work, other right kinds of writing work. Like I said, ghostwriting. Um, since 2009, I've been interviewed on talk shows, podcasts, radio. So I did that in 2009. Primarily started with an article that I had written in a publication called Honolulu Weekly. I'd written about a wind power firm that was under investigation in the state of New York, and I started I was interviewed on radio shows in New York State, upstate New York, about that. That's where it all kind of started. And so I've been on shows since 2009. So I had a blog on Medium.com. It's still up, although I stopped writing it. I wrote it from about 2017 when I retired to
Okay.
2021 in terms of pieces. I, ended it at last year. So people want to check it out. They can go to medium.com/at the Doctor 50 to check out my blog, which is about media and current news at the time. But I don't do my blog anymore. It's interesting because I had done some. I dealt a couple of true crime, I guess you could call it true crime cases or something. I wrote about DB Cooper, and one of my blog pieces was Anniversary
Oh, I
Squad,
love DB
and
Cooper.
about, yes, yeah, yeah. So I've been interviewed about DB Cooper on shows, on a couple of shows. I did a show last year called The Ocelli Effect, where I was interviewed about DB Cooper. It's the last time I talked about him. Fascinating case. Now, that kind of ties into Unsolved
It really
Mysteries
was.
because DB Cooper, I ended up talking about DB Cooper on a couple of shows, being interviewed. That case and a couple other cases. One about Bobby Fuller, musician, and his death. Another about a journalist called Danny Casolaro, and a guy called Ray Rivera. That one was for the new Unsolved Mysteries. Heard about that? I had been interviewed about some cases that were featured on Unsolved Mysteries. And so, how I wound up writing it for my Substack, which I've done since
Hmm.
2021. I've been doing a Substack since 2021. Um, how I wound up doing that was I heard about the anniversary of Unsolved Mysteries, and I thought about the cases which I just mentioned that I've been interviewed on shows about. So I thought, well, because I had been on shows and I had been asked, where did you get, where did you find out about this case and where did you hear about this case? And I'd say Unsolved Mysteries. I saw it on Unsolved Mysteries. So I figured if I could state I got this case from Unsolved Mysteries or I saw this case as a segment on Unsolved Mysteries, why not talk about Unsolved Mysteries? And that's precisely what I did. So I decided, okay, I'll talk about the show and started doing prep on the show, research, because I didn't know anything about the show. And last year was the 35th anniversary of the show, and they were, I
Yeah.
heard, and of course that was what had sparked my, that curiosity about it.
Yeah, I remember
And
growing up as
I
a
was doing
teenager.
actually research. Okay, yeah, I used to watch the show. I used to watch the show. I was in college. I'd get home from a late class, and I'd head to my apartment, and I was home just in time to watch Unsolved Mysteries. I think it was on Wednesday nights, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I recall, and I think that was the case. So basically, I was doing this research on Unsolved, and I never intended to do an article on Unsolved. I just intended to go on shows like this and talk about it. And I wound up doing the article because I was looking at my notepad, this, which had notes about Unsolved, and I went, why? I could make an article out of this. So I've had a Substack since 2021, and
Okay.
I decided, okay, I'll write this up, and that's where you may be able to help solve a mystery came from. It came from that. It came from looking at my notes, preparing to talk about Unsolved Mystery. And even that article originally was really going to be a history of the show, plus the behind the scenes production, which I got really interested in because I was doing research. I didn't know anything about the show itself, and I got really interested in the behind the scenes. So that's all a prelude and a setup to you may be able to help solve a mystery, which is my article on Substack. My Substack, of course, albertlanier.substack.com, and my Substack newsletter is That Is the Week That Is, just so people know. And I'll probably say this at the
So,
end of the show, too. Go ahead.
so Albert, if I may, sitting here listening to your um, unsolved mysteries and all that stuff. So I actually have a question because Mac and I have been doing our own investigations. We started a show, um, doing investigations, digging into things, and there's a case from June 25th of 2007. It's the Benoit case, the double murder suicide. Chris Benoit being a wrestler for WWE,
Mm,
uh, went and murdered his wife, his son, and then supposedly had murdered or committed suicide. Um, Mac and I have been going over everything, and it's not adding up.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of strong evidence that we both believe he is innocent. However, we think that there's a lot of cover up to where they just have locked it down to being double murder suicide, close the case, be done with it. There's a lot that is not being said, a lot that's being covered up. we've been taking our own notes and things like that.
Yeah, a whole book right here full of notes
Oh,
on.
yeah. So your note, yours is bigger than mine. I just have my old reporter's notebook, but yours is much
So,
bigger.
but so my
Or
question is,
larger, I should say.
have you heard about that case? And if so, what do you know about it?
I think I heard that he died. I think I heard that he died. It doesn't surprise me. I've only been talking about true crime cases. That's a whole other thing. I never covered crime as a journalist. I never covered crime as a writer during my 22-year career. So I never did that. And it was odd. I ended up doing it because I was supposed to go on a show to talk about, I think, related to Danny Casolaro, the inslaw and the octopus aspect on another show. And the host, because I had promised the host when I was on a show previously, I'll come back and do that. And he wasn't so interested in talking about it at that point. And I said, well, which is unusual. I asked, what are you interested in talking about? And he said, well, true crime's interesting. It's hot. Hollywood's, like the only ones that I kind of knew about, because I didn't follow true crime, was
Gotcha.
Bob Crane, the former star of Hogan's Heroes, and his death. I knew about that as a kid. Found that out. The first celebrity death I ever found out about. So, and then Natalie Wood was another one I did when I was young. So that's what started it for me. In regards, so I never intended to be on shows talking about true crime cases, just so that people know. I don't have a background in it. And I know there are these, I don't know if you're one of them, but these like amateur sleuths that try to solve crimes or whatever. I don't know if you guys are getting into that. I don't know. Sounds like you've done some investigating on the Benoit. I gave you Benoit, as you were saying. I don't pretend to be an amateur sleuth. I always say I'm not a police detective. I'm not a private detective. I'm a consulting detective like Sherlock Holmes. But that's about it. That's it. Uh, but yeah,
I
I
think when it
don't
comes
know enough
down,
about that case to talk about it.
I would say, I think when it comes down to for us is not so much for anybody else's benefit, other than for our own peace of mind. And it's one of those things. It's like, it's a shame of the result and what happened. At the same time, I think it's just something like that has gotten so out of control. It comes a time where you really start to think, okay, you know what? You need to have a peace of mind for yourself. Because, I mean, we're talking back in 2007, and we're in 2024 now, and people are still, very divided, and they're still talking about it. They're still very one sided on it and everything. And some people, like in our case, we just kind of sit back. It's like, it kind of eats at you. And when something eats at you, it's like, yeah, you want to have a solution to it. How do you give yourself a peace of mind? So, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily pretending to be. It's just more or less doing it for not only our peace of mind, but it gives us something to kind of dig into on our own personal time.
Well, that sounds kind of like what the producers of Unsolved Mysteries have kind of said about the
Right.
show and the whole idea of unsolved, well, technically cold cases, right? I have to be brutally honest. I didn't know a lot about quote unquote true crime. That's an odd phrase.
Right.
As opposed to what? False crime? What does that
Yeah.
mean? Um, I guess as this, as separate from detective fiction and that as a genre. But
Right.
honestly, in the few years, 2019 was when I was interviewed about Bob Crane on Parallax Views, and that's when I started doing at times true crime cases. What I've
Right.
learned over the past few years is, and this was certainly the case with Unsolved Mysteries. I certainly got this from Unsolved Mysteries when I saw it, and still see it. There are a lot of unsolved deaths and there are a
Oh
number of
yeah.
suspicious deaths across this country. And what looks like self-deletion, um, just so that YouTube doesn't get mad, may not be self-deletion. So I'm. It's very easy to classify a case this way of a death because you don't have to put in the legwork, and you don't have to, and it's easier for the law enforcement agencies
Right.
if it looks like that's going to be the case. But there are a lot of suspicious deaths in this country, a lot of them, and they're basically. I'm just going to come out and say it. They're basically homicides disguised as self deletions.
Yeah.
That's what they are, and it happens, and it's not. So people understand this. In the time that I've been looking, because I look at videos, I've looked at true crime videos, and I listen to a couple of podcasts. The amount of cases that I've seen and heard about, and even looked into a little, I didn't know there were so many cold cases across the country. I didn't know. I mean, you look at some of these cases and you go. So I don't blame you for thinking that there's something up with that, especially when you're dealing with somebody who has a degree of fame, a name. Celebrity deaths um, are among the most suspicious.
Oh yeah.
The one I looked into was Bobby Fuller, and he was a minor celebrity. That is the strangest celebrity death I've ever seen. Strangest. It's I wrote a piece on my blog about it, and look, that's that. I mean, so I don't really blame you. But getting into unsolved mysteries, um, I haven't seen the new show. Like I had seen a couple clips of the Rivera episode, which is part of the reason I did it. I was interviewed about it and talked about it. But I haven't really seen the new show, so I don't know if they've covered something like that on the new show. I don't think they have, but the thing about Unsolved Mysteries, well, I'll ask you guys a question. Did you guys actually watch the original Unsolved Mysteries, the original show? And if so, what did you
Robert
think about
Stack. Robert Stack is actually my favorite host. Feel to the show. It was one of those he he fit the hosting role, and I couldn't just
it?
for me there's nobody better than Robert Stack. Watching the show, and I still watch it from time to time. I'll watch it on Pluto. They have their
Mhm.
own channel on there, so I'll go back and watch that. And it's just it intrigues me. I love getting into that type of stuff. To sit back is like, did they solve it? Okay, well, as of now, um, this is what the original show says. But then you look back at the newer stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, well, they're bringing this up how many years later, and they were able to solve something that was on the original show, and it connects it all together. So to sit back and kind of
Mhm.
see that, some of the cases tying into, both shows, or I love the whole concept behind it.
Okay, right.
I was
So go ahead. So the concept of the unsolved mysteries, the fact that you have not just unsolved mysteries, but different kinds of unsolved mysteries, was appealing to you.
Oh yeah.
Well, what about you?
I was actually more into the Cold Case Files with
Hmm.
Bill Curtis. I
Ah, I
started
see.
watching. Yeah, I started watching that 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and just really caught my eye. I didn't watch Unsolved Mysteries until I was in high school,
Mm.
um, and it always came on Wednesday nights. And I haven't watched it since I've gotten out of high school, so I'm not too much familiar with the new episodes and new host.
Mhm. Well, the new show is, well, they've done a couple reboots. Well, just to give a kind of timeline history to the show as a series, it's interesting the history of it because I didn't know the history of the show. Like I said, I honestly was not technically a fan of the show. I was not a fan. I just like watch the show because you watch a lot of shows. You're not a fan of every show you watch. Like I'm a
Yeah.
Star Trek fan. I could talk about Star Trek all day, all night, all weekend, any. I
Captain
know a lot
Picard.
about it.
Yep.
I didn't know that with Unsolved Mysteries. So I was doing my research and I got really into the whole behind the scenes production aspect. It was interesting to me. But what was interesting about the show when I was looking at the history of it was that it started out as the origin is usually confined or it really comes from these specials that emerged in the mid 80s, about the 85. And the first special was done by this team of documentarians, John Crossgrove and Terry Dunn, and they had done this special for NBC. They had done documentaries before. They had done one for HBO um, about guns. I don't know what others they had done, but they had done this docu. So this documentary was special on NBC. Was called "Missing. Have You Seen This Person?" And it dealt with missing people's cases. It was hosted by Meredith Baxter, who was on the show Family Ties, which was a big, fairly big hit sitcom at the time. Michael J. Fox
Yeah.
starred that show. Went on to bigger things. And her husband, I believe, was David Byrne. He was also an actor. And so they did that special. It did well in the ratings. And so they did a couple more specials, I think in 1986. They did a couple more. In fact, the first special was nominated for an Emmy. So that was unusual because I don't think there were a lot of I don't think there was a lot of programming that dealt with missing people. And this kind of true crime esque or related aspect. So what happened was that in 1987, the first Unsolved Mysteries special aired, and it was hosted not by Robert Stack, but by Raymond Burr. So if you're a fan of TV, you may know he was Perry Mason, star Perry Mason. And he did the first Unsolved Mystery special, and that was I think January of 1987. So that technically was the pilot. The pilot was not an hour-long show; it was a special. It was an hour-long special or so. And then they got a couple more specials they had a couple more specials with Carl Malden, who also was a TV star at one point, mostly movie actor, but he had been on Streets of San Francisco. That was his big show. He'd done American Express commercials, I believe, that I recall, because I recall Streets of San Francisco. And so he did a couple of specials, and then Robert Stack hosted last four specials, I believe, of Unsolved. And the network liked what they see. So it was an interesting kind of development process for Unsolved Mysteries. Unsolved Mysteries was not really developed like most TV shows on the primetime network TV schedule, meaning you have your hour-long dramatic shows, you have your half hour, which is sitcom. Normally you have a script that's a pilot script, and if you get a green light, you do a pilot, and then you go. The pilot sells to a network. Network decides they're gonna green light it for a full for a order, meaning to order up episodes. Then you would get. I'm trying to remember back then, maybe six. I'm trying to remember the. Hope I'm not getting it wrong. But they would do an order, and so Unsolved Mysteries wasn't a fictional show. It was what I would call a true life series. And so in my view, their development happened primarily through specials. So it was very different. It wasn't like another show like, hey, we have a pilot or maybe these days presentation or something. If indeed, I don't even think they do pilots in television as much these days. Because normally you try to sell a show, try to sell
Yeah.
a series to a streamer or cable
How
network.
I noticed that they've done it is they put the pilot out there, or they would do so many episodes for the first season, and then they would end up, if the network wanted to renew, they would renew it by season and just kind of see how it goes. And then, for instance, George Lopez, I used to love that show,
Okay.
and they were originally supposed to come out with season 8, I believe, 7 or 8, and they ended up midway through. They said no, we're not gonna. And they had everything written out, and they said no, we don't want to renew. We're gonna cancel, because that one of the shows. And now that I'm looking back at it, I don't think. Excuse me. So my wife and kids, their series finale was not supposed to be their series finale.
Right.
They ended up making it their series finale, because after that episode, nobody wanted to renew it. They did have plans to extend it further. Something must just, I think it was declined in
It,
viewership.
it's really weird when it comes to cancellations of series. It varies. They don't always get an answer, and often it's
No.
political. In terms of what's going on in the network, it's never purely a straight answer. Sometimes it is, the series declines in viewership, and it looks like so. It really depends on the series, right? Some series they don't end. They don't have a real season finale. Like I think when Married with Children was on Fox, I think 11 seasons or something like that. They didn't even really have a real season finale. They just got
That's just like
basically.
with Full House. Full House never had a clear ending finale, or I forget the name of the other show. I think it was like Family Matters, or
Yeah.
um, they never had a
But
clear ending.
it really depends on the show. But
I mean, you get like Grey's Anatomy, who's in their 20th season or something like that, and I mean, they're doing their last season now, but I mean, you get, very rarely do you get a series to stretch 20 seasons, 20 plus seasons.
yeah, that'd be
I
a show
mean,
like there'd be a show like Gunsmoke. Gunsmoke was 20. I don't know how many because they tried to cancel. They was that show got canceled, and the head of CBS, I think that was one of his favorite shows. I think it was William Bailey, if I recall correctly. That was like his favorite show, and he was like,
Yeah,
no, no, this can't be. I mean, so I think, and I think there was an outcry, but they brought it back, I think, for a season or so, at least a season. Because it was funny. I was looking at an interview recently with Daniel J. Travanti, who was on Hill Street Blues, and he had done a couple of Gunsmoke episodes, and he was mentioning, yeah, there was an outcry over the fact they canceled it, and they brought the show back for at least a season. But that Law and Order had at least 20 seasons, I guess. Yeah, it's very rare. Most hour-long shows don't get that. If you get,
the only time I did something like that is with General Hospital. I
well,
think
they
they've been
just keep
on.
going on, right? Those soap operas, they just
Yeah.
keep going on and
yeah,
on and on and on.
yeah. Soap operas like Days of Our Lives. I mean, I remember my grandmother sipping her cup of coffee and watching that, and that was like back in 1998, and I'm 34 years old now, and it's like 30 some years later, and that show's still on, and a
Yep.
lot of the people that were on when I was a kid are still there, and I'm
Yeah.
like, will this
Well,
show ever end?
I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. I have to be brutally honest. I know a good deal about TV, but I wasn't a TV critic or a TV writer, so that's why writing this piece, you may be able to help solve a
Mm-hmm.
mystery. It's the name of my piece. Writing this piece was very different for me. I never really written about TV shows. I remember when I used to have a column years ago. I wrote about the end of Seinfeld. I did a column on the end of Seinfeld called because I used to have a newspaper column for like a small suburban newspaper, and I think the name of my column, if I recall correctly, was that the title of that column was "Much Ado About Nothing." Um, but I wrote about Seinfeld, the end of Seinfeld, and I had done a couple set visits. Like I had done a couple stories where I visited the sets of shows. I visited the set of Baywatch when they were here in Hawaii filming 2 seasons. That was extremely interesting, fascinating, I would say. And I was on a couple. I was on location of. I think I did a set visit or location visit of a show that was filming in the islands, Pacific Blue. I think it was on USA, and I had done
Oh,
one
Pacific
on
Blue. I remember that
Hawaii
show.
Five-O. Yeah, the new Hawaii Five-O. It's funny with Pacific Blue. Yeah, I can talk about that's a whole other that's a whole other. I can't get much off topic because I'm here to talk about unsolved mysteries, but yeah, that's the Baywatch. Yeah, that was really interesting. It was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. Even the Pacific Blue, I think the actress who was a guest star on that went on to play like the Terminator in one of the
Hmm.
Terminator movies. I've forgotten her name, but I don't know, I was near poolside talking to this gorgeous lady. It was one of the things I recall about it. So yeah, I did. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a TV critic or a TV writer. I don't really know anything about TV critics. I used to be a film reviewer, so I
Okay.
used to review movies. I used to cover film festivals here in Hawaii. I wrote
Hmm.
for a film website called Ain't It Cool News, and later on, initially I covered the festivals here for local publications. So yeah, I'm not really a TV guy. Watch TV shows like anybody, like you guys, like anyone else, but never really. So this is kind of a new thing. This has been a new experience. Talking about Unsolved and talking about TV. Writing about TV wasn't something I normally did, so it's been interesting. It's been very interesting. So it in regards to Unsolved, so like I said, I really kind of got into the behind the scenes with the show because I didn't know anything about Unsolved, how it was produced, anything of that sort. And I got really into it because I was intrigued by the fact that they had to do all these segments. In my piece, you may be able to help solve a mystery. I One of the things I noticed, the show is essentially because Cosgrove and Muir have a documentary film background. And the people that worked on the show, directors often were documentary filmmakers. So that was one of the reasons I'd say this show was different. Essentially, at the beginning, they were shooting on like 35. I'm not 35. They were shooting on 16, I think, 16 millimeter. And the show, because I went back in terms of the research for the article to go look at first season episodes primarily, because I've seen episodes over the years. I saw first season episodes, and um, it's interesting. The look of the show, it had a very documentary type feel to it, kind of like a news report. That's why they had that kind of those titles at the beginning where they said it's not a news report, and I could see
Right.
why they did that because it had that kind of feel to it, even though it was shot on film. It felt like old, news in the '60s and '70s and so forth, news TV stations and so forth. It had that kind of feel to it. And I think later on in the show, they went to, I guess, digital. They shot on video, and it didn't look as good. It just didn't. But it looked great. And so it had one of the things that I think made it different, made the original Unsolved Mysteries different, was the fact that the show really was more documentary filmmaking individuals behind the scenes. It was run by two documentary filmmakers. They were basically showrunners, Cosgrove and John Cosgrove and Terry Dunmure. It was a far cheaper show than most of these shows on the networks because I think Cosgrove did an interview where he said he compared it to a show called In the Heat of the Night. They said, well, their budget's 1.5 million per episode, and our episodes are like 25 to what, I think 40%. At least I had 25%. And I
Mhm.
think it was probably they were probably doing that show for at least probably starting out 200 grand an episode, way smaller budgets than your typical TV 1 hour, what would be known as 1 hour long or 1 hour dramas. And so they were doing it. I think it got up. I think eventually the episodes were certainly higher in terms of per budget. Um, I think that maybe they cracked 500,000. I think so. But I know it was like 300,000 probably starting out. And so it had that it shot on 16 millimeter film. It had that kind of news report type TV news, old TV news. I call it now old TV news type feel because it was film. And it
Yeah.
had this kind of also documentary feel to it. And I think also the structure to me was like take it from news shows. News shows are divided normally into blocks: A block, B block, C block, D. So that's how I looked at Unsolved Mystery when I analyzed it. I went, yeah, it's like, because normally the structure was 4 to 5 cases per show, right? Per episode. And that might include an update. And the updates were, from what I learned, a crew that went out and did them. So they send a crew, oh, we got an update on this case in Arizona, and they'd send that crew out to Arizona and shoot B-roll and get that. And they'd often have to, because there's a documentary that's out about Unsolved. I think it's on YouTube called Behind the Mystery. I think it's called Behind the Mystery.
I know there used to be something about unsolved mysteries on Netflix. I don't know if it's up there
Yeah,
anymore. I
that's the
know.
reboot. That's the new
Oh,
one.
okay,
That's a brand new
gotcha.
one that's been since 2020. So I know Terry Dunn Muir is involved. I don't know if John Cosgrove is involved, but they were doing.
I
I
know.
think
I'm sorry. It wasn't Netflix. I think it was Hulu that I saw it on. So that's probably the new one.
Well, the
yeah,
one
but
thing I noticed.
that's the channel
Go
that
ahead.
they're on. I don't know what the streaming
Oh, okay.
service, but the brand new one, which came out 2020, I guess till now. I don't know if it's still on the air. That's Netflix. That's the
Okay.
second reboot, technically. The first reboot after the show had its run was, excuse me, the first reboot after the show had its run was on Spike TV, the cable channel Spike TV, in 2008.
Oh,
And the host was Dennis Farina, an actor. I think he had been a
Yeah.
cop also. He had been on Law and Order, and he had done a number of movies, and he was the host. And that was kind of a repackaged show. So that was kind of
He made a pretty
repackaged
good host.
for.
I'm not one for reboots and stuff like that unless they're done well. I have to say, Dennis made a pretty good host. The one thing I noticed that was a dramatic change, and I didn't too much care for it, was with Robert Stack. You had the mystery. Usually, when you've seen him and they shot over towards him talking and hosting, you didn't get really a background. It was just him and a darkened area. Again, bringing that mystery, mysterious feel to it. Whereas to with Dennis, it was him in almost like a police building, or a huge setup with monitors and all that. Very
Right.
very very different feel. And I mean, but it complemented him, and that's what I like, is if it can if the background can complement the host and it works, then I'm for it if it works well.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
don't usually get that very often with shows. Usually something will go wrong, or it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't do as well as the original. Unfortunately, after Dennis, I haven't really seen the new ones, um, but it's definitely something that I am interested in at least checking out.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think that's a fair way to appraise it. With the look, the background, the setting, set piece, even you could call it,
Right.
fits
Mhm.
the host, and it's a different kind of unsolved. which I think it
Right.
was. My article is about the original with Robert Stack, so I mentioned the new one, but I don't get into it. I just mentioned that there was a new one in 2008 to about 2010 on Spy TV, and then the reboot, which is on Netflix. I don't know if it's been renewed, but I know there have been like three volumes, I guess 3 seasons of it. I recently was on it because I'm on a couple unsolved groups uh, on social media, and I asked about the new show, and so it was interesting to get people's opinions about it. I don't know how well the show is done on Netflix, that new one, so I can't talk about it because I was asked on I think one show, the last show I did, what did I think of the Netflix show, and I haven't seen it. I've seen clips, a few clips, and that's it. That's it. So I can't really talk about it. And my piece, you may be able to help solve a mystery, really deals with the old show with Robert Stack, the original. And so, like I was saying before, the show, the structure of the show with the 4 to 5 cases and segments, I think has a sort of news magazine, derived from news magazines, news shows, A, B,
Right.
C, D block, even if they don't call it that. That's been my thesis and my analysis in looking at Unsolved. I think also when you look at Unsolved, you have to look at the fact that the show was very different. That they did all these different types of mysteries, so they didn't focus on one type of mystery. And the original Unsolved is interesting insofar as it's kind of a breakthrough show in regards to especially um, true crime programming, but they don't consider themselves a true crime show. I've seen Terry Dunn Muir, who's one of the producers, interviewed. She doesn't consider that a real crime show. It's like a mystery show, which it is. It is a mystery show. But to be fair, the crime element of the show was one of the major elements in Unsolved Mysteries because it helped the show. The fact that they included as part of the show the what used to be PO Box, maybe for the specials. Certainly, when they went to network, when they went to air with the series, they had the 1-800
Right.
number, and that was what helped make the show very different. It was interactive. People could call it in an era where TV shows were not interactive. There was no, you couldn't call in and say Murphy Brown should get another secretary and this is the secretary she should get. You couldn't comment on TV shows. Nowadays, with YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, maybe people can go and make videos and they can have live streams and they can talk about shows.
Yeah.
Clearly, you see that on social media. You see it on Facebook, see it on X. They can talk about shows. You couldn't do that back when that happened, back in
Right.
1988, which is when Unsolved Mysteries first went on the air, October 1988. So it was very different. I think the multiplicity of different kinds of mysteries made the show different. They didn't just,
Yeah.
and in my piece, one of the things I do is I compare it to another show that had previously been on the air called In Search of, which was hosted by Leonard Nimoy. And I said In Search of, that was like 30 minutes, I think, normally. At least a half hour. I don't know if it was a full hour. But it was single subject episodes, meaning you just had that subject for that episode, which is normally how most shows of that what I call true life shows, uh, or fact based shows, you could call it. Normally
One
were.
thing I
You
love
had
about
one subject and you looked into it and you examined it. And Unsolved was different in that you could have historical on In Search of, you could have the unexplained historical, which is mostly what that show was about. Um,
well with the original Unsolved Mysteries, and that was another thing I often really liked was how they didn't cover just the whether it was a murder or this or that. They branched out to the paranormal, the whether it was just a missing case or a solved
Mhm.
case. They expanded their range, whether it was straight paranormal or just the unexplained, whether it was something to do with the Bigfoot or so there was a vast variety to bring in more viewers rather than just those people that are interested in um, I guess not the unsolved crimes.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that was one thing that appealed to me was okay, well, it's not just about the unsolved mystery, the unsolved crime cases. It's
Mhm.
about the paranormal. It's about Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster.
Mhm.
And so that was another thing that I always thought was
Right.
interesting.
And I would argue, um, say, interrupted by the phone. I would argue that that was part of the success of. I think anyone can see that was part of the success of the show. The show was successful because it was very different. Other shows simply did not do what Unsolved did. They didn't look at
Right.
let's just make up something. Let's just say Jack the Ripper in the A Block, and let's just say there was obviously it didn't happen there, but Benoit, the case that you mentioned in the B
Right.
Block, and then maybe you
Yep.
have a missing person in the C Block, and
Mm.
then D would be an update, and then E would be maybe I don't know, a lost
Paranormal
one or
case.
something like that.
Yeah.
That made it. I don't want to say there was something for everyone because you know there were only so many categories. I hear it was like 20 categories in my research, but there was something that anyone could be at least mildly interested in. That was the difference. So it was a kind of tricky show in that it wasn't a show that you could just, from my understanding, the demos were kind of, I guess I don't think they just had one sole demographic. Like in television, you have 18 to 34, 34 to, I don't know, 54 or whatever it is, or 34 to 44 or whatever it is. And okay, and what would appeal? I think it cut across a lot of different demos. When I look at the fact that the show, it started on NBC in October 1988, lasted for about 9 seasons, then went to CBS for 2 seasons, then went to Lifetime for about a season or two. And Lifetime's a woman's network, female network. They did the reboot on Spike TV, which is a guy's channel, a men's channel.
Yeah.
So if you look at that disparate aspect, the fact that they had, because I think the reruns for Unsolved before it went there to Unsolved went to Lifetime, were on Lifetime. They were doing the show. I think was in syndication there. Um, the fact that Lifetime and Spike TV both had Unsolved says to me that the show cut across a number of demographics, a number of groups, a number of types of people. It was kind of a wide
Absolutely.
ranging audience in regards to it. So it makes sense. The show, after all, was a show that normally broke top 20, sometimes top 10 in terms of the networks. So it was a successful show, I think, because, and I look at the success, but what's interesting to me about the show was the structure of the show. The like what I call it A B C D E block kind of
Mm-hmm.
structure, which borrows from news, and the fact that this was a show that dealt with different kinds of mysteries. It wasn't solely one mystery, one subject. So what in my case, when I would watch it, I didn't like all the paranormal, what the producers would call the ooga booga stuff. Um, I didn't like all that ghost stuff, supernatural stuff. So I would turn it if it was there to something else, and come back and see, oh, missing person. I'll watch it. So there, it was a diverse kind of show within its structure, and the
Mm-hmm.
way it was set up was interesting. And and also in regards to it, I don't want to give too much away in terms of my article. Um, but I think what I'll cite is one aspect of I think why the show worked was the fact that it was shot on location. That the show looked authentic. If a
Right.
crime took place in Arkansas, they went to Arkansas. If a missing person left Chicago, Illinois, they went to Chicago, Illinois. They went to the places where the cases happened. So that was a big deal, you know, and I think it also helped the look of the show because you didn't get something that was just shot on a soundstage. This wasn't shot
Right.
on a set. This was something that was shot, or not entirely on a set. It was shot outside people's homes, in town squares, in cities. It was shot around the country. And so, in one sense, you got a sense not only of the cases, which were alive and vivid to you, and for people also, it probably was like skin in the game, as I mentioned, with the 1-800 number that they could call. They could, it's also was very immediate to them. Even so, if you saw someone that was a fugitive that was on the run or something, you could go, yeah, I know that guy. He works at the store I do. He works at the store I'm at, or
Mm-hmm.
he's in the office, or maybe even there are people who might have said, "Hey, this guy delivered something to me." I don't know, but people could get involved in that. But I think part of that also deals with the fact that it went around the country, that it shot in different places, used crew in different
Right.
states that they were in. Like I think when they went to Russia to do a segment on Anastasia, um, you know, the supposed Romanov family. She's not really, but she wasn't. I think it was discovered. They found the real Anastasia. But they went to Russia in the 90s and used a Russian crew to shoot that segment. And, you know, you look at that segment on Anastasia, it's I think, one of the best looking ones I've seen. And they had good looking ones. Like I remember they did one on Lincoln. I think Lincoln being assassinated. And you see the scenes where Union troops are coming out, and the show, cinematography or photography looked pretty nice, and lighting was okay. Lighting had a mood to it at times, especially if it was like paranormal stuff or crime oriented stuff, and of course music. People talk about the theme, and the use of music is very interesting. It
So I
created
mean,
atmosphere. The show created atmosphere. And so that's one of the reasons it
there's
was
a
so good
lot
there.
there.
People said they were
There's
scared, right? You hear people talk, "Oh, I was scared when I watched the show. It was scary. Oh man,
yeah.
I was afraid because of all these elements: lighting, music, uh, the way the segments are photographed. It creates an ambiance and an environment. And then when you have the authenticity of the different towns and cities and suburbs and places they went, you could just see all of that come together. And it's really kind of, to me, fascinating that it all just worked.
Yeah.
I don't think there was
I
a
mean,
template for doing this. I think they put
no.
this together and they managed to make it work. And you got to give them credit. A bunch of documentary filmmakers doing this. So
I mean, there's definitely a lot there. Um, but unfortunately, we have come to an end. We've kind of run out of time there.
all right,
So, is there anything? Yeah, I mean, your books and your articles and stuff. You said that you would make mention of it at the end of the show.
right,
Would you like to let
sure.
viewers know where they can find your articles and stuff?
Well, of course, you can go and read the article. You may be able to help solve a mystery at my Substack, which is albertlanier.substack.com. The newsletter is That Is the Week That Is. Again, the newsletter That Is the Week That Is at my Substack, albertlanier.substack.com. And the title of the piece is You May Be Able to Help Solve a Mystery. If you want to, I didn't do any blogs. I didn't write about Unsolved, obviously, in my blog. My blog's over. But if you still want to check out my blog, you can go to medium.com/@thedoctor50. That's medium.com/@thedoctor50. You can find me on both Facebook and X. Facebook under my name, Albert Lanier. I'm on X at Critic Inc. I mostly talk about movies there, so I deal with movies on my
Okay.
so I talk about movies, and so people can find me there. And again, an important aspect to note about Unsolved Mysteries is so this is a piece that looks at why it worked. And I don't know if a lot's been written since last year about why it's worked and why it's successful, but not why the show works as much. I think most of what I came across in terms of promotion was about Matthew McConaughey being in a segment, which nothing against Matthew McConaughey, but I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I've seen that
Right.
segment. No, I don't want to do it. So what I would like to leave people with at the very end is to say that the show, it is a piece that I think both non-fans of the show and fans can appreciate. So of course, if you are interested in Unsolved Mysteries, and you would, there are people out there, of course, who are interested in Unsolved Mysteries, and they'd be interested in an article about Unsolved Mysteries. Perhaps those people are watching or listening. Perhaps
Absolutely.
it's you.
Well, thank you, Albert, for coming on the show and spending
Thank
the
you.
hour with us. And
Thank you. I
absolutely,
appreciate
if,
it.
We'd like to get you back on for a part 2 though, because the story just is very interesting. And
absolutely, no, I mean, we'll definitely check our schedules and see what we can do. But yeah, we'd love to have you back on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I can do that. Yeah. To talk about Unsolved or to talk about something else? Well,
Whatever you want.
it sounds like you're interested in you're investigating some true crime aspects. So why don't I come back and talk about a case that was on Unsolved Mysteries?
okay.
Ray
All right, yeah,
Rivera. I'll talk about Ray Rivera. I'll come back and
Okay.
we will. Yeah, let's. Mac and I will get together and check our schedules and see what we can do. Yes, thank you, Albert, again for being on the show, and we will
All right. Well,
definitely
thank you
catch
for
you
having
down
me.
the road here. Thank you.